initially, when I said I wanted to do this talk, I thought, okay, I'll just talk about undesigned coincidences. And then as I started doing the study, I suddenly thought, why am I wanting to talk about undesigned coincidences? Is it, what about it fascinates me? And then I realized it's because it absolutely proves to me that there could only be one author, and that could only be God. And that we are going to need to, and that it's not the only thing I'm wanting to look at, because I started looking at the coincidences, and then I suddenly came across contradictions, and I thought, but that also proves that the Bible is true. And then I looked, and I thought, we're looking at pictures, and Liesl and I'm doing these stories, and I'm seeing these different pictures, and I thought, okay, that even makes me believe in the Bible more and believe in a God, and how much hope one gets through reading the Bible. So I've changed my title to a biblical potpourri, and hopefully you'll see why I'm also really super excited about the different things. Okay, so we're going to be looking at quite a few references, and then I'm going to have Liesl and Vuyo read the references for us, and then we'll have a chat about each one of them. So I'm also jumping right throughout the Bible, and then at the end, hopefully I'll be able to bring all my thoughts together. So if Liesl can read Matthew 14, verse 2 for us, and then Vuyo is going to just now read Luke 8, verse 3 for us. So we're now really looking at undesigned coincidences first. So Matthew 14, verse 2, please.
He said to his advisors, "This must be John the Baptist, raised from the dead. That is why he can do such miracles."
Okay, so interesting. Why does it say there, and he said unto his advisors? Why doesn't he just say, and he said, this is John the Baptist? He specifically says to his advisors, and then he talks about John the Baptist. So you can say there, why is he questioning this? And it's only in Matthew that we read that Herod made this kind of guess about the origins of Jesus or John the Baptist. But then if we go to Luke 8, verse 3, if we all can read that for us, please.
Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household, Susanna, and many others, these women were helping to support them out of their own means.
Okay, thank you. So again, can you see out of all those women's names, it says Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household. A whole qualification coming in there, where the rest is just the name of the woman. And these are the women that were following Jesus and ministering to them as he was going through the country. So Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's steward. And in Matthew, you link it to Herod says this in front of his stewards or in front of his servants. So who was one of his servants? The head servant, Chuza, was standing there. He could hear what Herod was saying, and that's why the disciples knew what, and they could record that that Herod was guessing all of this about Jesus's background, if he was the risen John the Baptist. So every word in the Bible is important, and that's the kind of thing I enjoy, is when suddenly something is over-explained. So exactly like it was there in Luke 8, verse 3. Another nice coincidence is 2 Samuel 15, and if we can go to 2 Samuel 11, verse 3. But actually, we're not going to read the whole of 2 Samuel 15. But if you read the whole record in 2 Samuel 15, you'll see it's this whole story about David, and where Ahithophel is now a counselor and cooperating with Absalom, who is revolting against David. But if you read previous records about David, Ahithophel had actually been one of his main counselors, one of his trusted people that he'd gone to for advice and for guidance. And now all of a sudden you find Ahithophel has moved from one side of the camp totally across to the other side. And your question should be, why? Why can he do this, where he was so faithful towards David? And the answer, or part of the answer, is already in 2 Samuel 11, verse 3. If we all can read that for me, please.
And David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, and the wife of Uriah the Hittite?"
Yeah, thank you. So this is now where David is going to commit adultery with Bathsheba. But can you see a whole lot of stuff is added? It's not just with Bathsheba, it's with Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite. So we start doing detective work. So 2 Samuel, as we all just read for us, this is where David finds out about Bathsheba. But then if you link it to 2 Samuel 23, and we're not going to read all of that, there's a whole genealogy there from verse 34 to 39. And this whole list of David's mighty men are written there. And in between all of those names, we find the name Eliam. And I think that's like around about verse 39, hey, Liz?
Eliam is 34.
34.
Son of Ahithophel.
Son of Ahithophel. Interesting. So Bathsheba was actually Ahithophel's granddaughter. Now you can understand why Ahithophel was so cross with David, and he could swap camps and become against him when, and he could turn the tables totally on David. So it's just like a little bit of like mystery work that you've got to kind of do. And none of those things needed to be recorded, but they are recorded just so that we can totally believe in what the scriptures are sharing with us. Another nice undesigned coincidence is in John 6. If Lisa would page to that one for us. John 6, verse 5. Well, everyone can page it, but Lisa will read for us, please.
John 6, verses 5. Jesus soon saw a huge crowd of people coming to look for him. Turning to Philip, he asked, "Where can we buy bread to feed all these people?"
Okay, so Jesus is with all his disciples. He's with this whole crowd of people, but it specifically says he turns to Philip and asks him where we can buy the bread. Why? Why Philip? Why not John or Peter? Well, the answer is in the other chapters. If you link this chapter where you read the same story in Luke, it says when he was talking over here, he was in Bethsaida. And then if we go to John chapter 1, I'll quickly read that one. In verse 44, it says, "Now Philip was of Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter." So now you can understand why Jesus said to Philip, "Where can we buy bread?" Because they were in Philip's hometown. Where it, again, none of this needed to be added, and none of these needed to be recorded at different places, but they were, which, again, to me, just makes it super exciting when you link all of these things together. Let's have a look at Matthew 4, verse 21. Ruya, will you read that one for us, please? And my question here is, why were James and John mending their nets?
Matthew 4, verse 21. Going on from there, we saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nest. Jesus called them.
And verse 22, please.
And immediately they left the boat, and their father followed him.
Okay. So don't you find that interesting? I mean, he's just walking along the shore. Here he comes. There's two men mending their nets. It didn't need to say they were mending their nets. I mean, they're fishermen. Why does it say they were mending their nets? And he calls them, and it's not a case of him negotiating with them. It just says immediately they left the ship. Now, I mean, if someone had to come walking down the road and say to me, hey, Leona, why don't you just come and follow me? And I'm busy actually doing my day's work. Why would I have the confidence to immediately follow you? So something must have happened. What happened? The answer is in Luke chapter 5. And again, we're not going to read the whole chapter. I've just got it summarized there. They were mending their nets because the miracle Jesus had of producing so many fishes had broken their nets. So they were part of this miracle where all of a sudden they couldn't be catching fish and they couldn't catch fish. And then all of a sudden they get this massive drought of fishes and then their nets are broken. So that's why they were mending their nets. But so they were part of this miracle. Matthew doesn't mention it. If you just read the book of Matthew, you wouldn't even know about this. But it explains to us why they immediately could leave and follow Jesus, because they had seen the miracle Jesus had performed about giving this whole mess of fish in the nets. So it's something worth doing. And it takes quite a while. Lucas and I, at a stage, we marked up, and you can get it from, there's two brethren, Brother Whitaker does it, where you can do the Gospels, that you actually read it chronologically. So you pick up where this has happened, and then the next thing happens. You don't read Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. You're constantly jumping through the Gospels. And then this makes it a lot easier to actually realize, oh, this is what happened now. I understand why that has happened. So something really worthwhile marking up in your Bible. And I can just show Liesel and you're here. I've got like little green arrows, which means go somewhere else. And I've got little blue dots, which says I'm coming from somewhere else. And that's how I have marked up my gospel, so I can read it that way. But you can see there's very interesting little things. This is one of my favorite ones. Mark 6, verse 39. Whose turn is it? Liesel's turn to read, please. Mark chapter 6, verse 39.
Then Jesus told the disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass.
All right, green grass. I mean, is grass ever any other color?
Dead.
Yep, it can be dead, but it's specifically green grass. So if you look at all the accounts in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, where the feeding of the 5,000 is recorded, it always says the green grass. If you look, there's also the feeding of the 4,000. There it only says, and he made them sit on the ground. Nothing else, just on the ground. So the green grass is actually telling us what season we are looking at. And that is what we can pick up. And then the Bible proves it. So as Liesel said, in the Middle East, the summer's too hot and dry for grass, it goes brown, shrivels up unless it's irrigated. Then in the autumn and the winter, it doesn't grow, and it only comes in springtime, a little before Passover time. And then we have this verified for us, because in John chapter 6, verse 4, we read, just by the by, it says there, Jesus went up into a mountain, and the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. So it's saying to us, okay, springtime was coming. So when people want to say to me, oh, you know what, the Bible's just a book written by a whole lot of different people, fishermen, prophets, kings, or whatever, you have these little things coming out, and you think, no, not possible. These are like little gems. I'm going to finish up with a couple of gems that I just picked up 2-3 days ago. Poor Lucas, I talked his ear off. Whether I discovered this other gem. Okay, so those are a couple of coincidences. I mean, there's a lot. And I believe even the contradictions are coincidences. So I'm not too sure if any of you have ever had this challenge, which we read of in Exodus 33, where it says, the Lord spoke to Moses face to face. And then just like 9 verses down, God says, no one can see my face and live. So how do we balance the two out? It doesn't make sense. It's a contradiction. But the answer is, still, if you just read the next chapter, so as we always tell the people at our Bible courses, find the context, read the verses before and the verses afterwards. In Isaiah 63 verse 9, where this is quoted, it qualifies what this Lord is who spoke to Moses face to face. In Exodus 34 verse 14, it says, no, I'm in Numbers. Maybe we're going to, no wonder it makes no sense. Genesis, Exodus 34 verse 14. Why does it not make sense? Because that's where God says, you will not worship any other God before me.
33 maybe.
Maybe it is 33. Let me have a look. Yes, it is 33, sorry. Typo there. He says, my presence will go with you and I will give you rest. So he constantly talks about my presence, my presence, my presence. But in Isaiah 63 verse 9, he says, the angel of my presence. So he qualifies that my presence is an angel. And if we go, I don't know if you want to quickly find us Acts chapter 7, please, or we are there. All right, excellent. We are. If you can just read verse 38 first for us, please.
He was in the assembly in the desert with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, and he received living words to pass on to us. Okay, so there
it's saying to us, Stephen is saying in his speech, it wasn't God, the Father speaking, it was an angel, God manifestation, speaking on behalf of God. And if you work through Acts chapter 7, you already pick that up in verse 30, verse 31, and verse 33. You can go to verse 30 and 31 and 33.
After 40 years had passed, an angel appeared to Moses in the flames of burning bush in the desert near Mount Sinai. When he saw this, he was amazed at the sight. As he went over to look more closely, he heard the Lord's voice, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Moses trembled with fear and did not dare to look. Then the Lord said to him, take off your sandals. The place where you are standing is holy ground.
Thank you, Vio. So can you see it was the angel appeared in a burning bush, but then it's the Lord's voice. So it's qualifying that it wasn't God as the Father being there. It was an angel manifesting God and speaking on behalf of God. So it's not a contradiction, but you kind of need to go into deep water to explain God manifestation, which often people struggle with. Okay. This is an interesting one. If Liesel, could you page to 2 Kings 18? There's this, and in 2 Kings 23, and I will read them both from your version because I'd be interested. This is what I've written down there is from the NLT. But this statement is made, there was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before him or after him. So, and this exact statement is made twice. So in 2 Kings 18 verse 5.
Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. There was no one like him among all the kings of Judah, either before or after his time.
Okay, so we would think no one like him. Only one person can be like that, right? But then in 2 Kings 23:25.
Never before had there been a king like Josiah, who turned to the Lord with all his heart and soul and strength, obeying all the laws of Moses. And there has never been a king like him since.
Okay, so now people can say, okay, so why? Never before a king like this. She's saying exactly the same thing, but there's a difference. Why was Hezekiah? What's the key word with Hezekiah?
He trusted in the Lord.
He trusted, and Josiah
turned.
He turned to the Lord. Yes. So they were commended for their different attributes. The one trusted, and the other one turned to the Lord. And in that respect, they were unique. Not necessarily that they were the only king. But people are very quick to pick on, oh, look at that statement. They're contradicting each other, so the Bible can't be true. Let's chuck everything out, baby and dishwater and everything else. So I enjoy having these things, but that to me is it shows how carefully we've got to read the Bible, not just skim over it. Okay. See, so you can see this is a real potpourri. That's why I got that picture there. It's like the petals and the leaves and the seeds, everything all together. But this is how my poor brain works, and this is how poor Lucas has to survive with me. So with me now, always people asking me to recommend storybooks or recommend Bible storybooks in particular. I often have major challenges, and I'll share with you why I have major challenges. And one of the biggest things is because a picture sticks with you. A picture stays in your brain. And then you think and you try and fit the Bible to fit in with the picture instead of saying, no, maybe the picture is just an artist's idea of what the Bible is about. So the first one, obviously this we always see in the children's storybooks, the snake with coming down, and definitely an apple. Wow. If you go and read Genesis 3 verse 6 and Genesis, would you like to do that quickly for us, Phil? So Genesis chapter 3 verse 6 and verse 14.
When the woman saw that the fruit of the tree was good for food and pleasing to the eyes, and also desirable for gaining wisdom, she took some and ate it.
Okay, so it doesn't say an apple, it says fruit. So we've got to be careful how we read. And then in verse 14.
So the Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all the livestock, and all the wild animals will crawl on your belly, and you will eat dust all the days of your life.
Okay, so while he was speaking to Eve, he must have had legs. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been a curse that he lost his legs and that he would now go to crawl on his belly. So, yeah, big challenge for me when I am looking at children's storybooks, because I do not believe that is a true depiction of actually what the Bible is teaching. It could have been an apple. I have no idea. Deb must maybe tell us if apple trees grow in abundance in that part of the world. I wouldn't know. I also wouldn't know why they chose an apple tree, the word apple. But again, we've got to remember it's a picture by an artist. It's not what the Bible is teaching us. Another picture I have challenges with, Exodus 2. Liz, if you can find Exodus 2, verse 11 and 12, and then Buyo, if you'd like to find Hebrews 11, verse 24 to 26. So this is now we're at the story of Moses, and when he is going to flee. If you can read verse 11 and 12 for us, please, Liz.
Many years later, when Moses had grown up, he went out to visit his own people, the Hebrews, and he saw how hard they were forced to work. During his visit, he saw an Egyptian beating one of his fellow Hebrews. After looking in all directions to make sure no one was watching, Moses killed the Egyptian and hid the body in the sand.
Okay, so Moses kills an Egyptian after he sees him beating up a fellow Hebrew. Now, I know in the movie, is it Prince of Egypt or something, they show Moses like this, dressed as an Egyptian who now has killed, who kills a fellow Egyptian. But if you carefully go and read Hebrews 11, verse 24 to 26, if we can quickly read that for me, please.
By faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He chose to be ill-treated along with the people of God rather than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for the short time. He regarded his disgrace for the sake of Christ as of the greater value than the treasure of Egypt, because he was looking ahead to his reward.
Thank you. So, but when he was grown up, so can you see we've got those words coming out again, as Liesel read, as he grew older, and here in verse 24, by faith Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be known as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. So I actually believe that when Moses got to a certain age, he actually turned his back on the palace and went and worked with the with the Hebrews. And that is why he also feared for his life. So these pictures to me are more correct, where you can actually see him not wearing the finery of a prince and the royal robes, but actually wearing just normal clothes like your Hebrews would have worn. And why he also feared for his life, because he had already made Pharaoh, and most probably Pharaoh's daughter, super cross with him, because he had said to them, you know what, I don't need your riches and I don't want to be called by your names. So his fear was not just based on the fact that he actually killed someone, it was actually double, because from a background he had actually now had no protection, especially when he stopped the two Hebrews from fighting, which is like literally the next day, and they something he thought he'd done in secret, everyone knew he had killed the Egyptian. So now he has got the Egyptians against him, he's got the Hebrews against him, so anything he can do is run to the desert. And it explains why he then stays far away for another good 40 years, because he totally felt rejected by both and misunderstood by everyone. This is a nice one. Now, Lucas's mom and I used to have great discussions about this, especially at Christmas time, because she always wanted to put the Christmas tree up with angels. So I said to her, no, that's fine, but you must take the wings off the angels, because as far as I'm concerned, angels don't have wings, then they become fairies. So yeah, it led to interesting discussions. But that's the picture we get of people's ideas of angels. It's always little cherubs and little very beautiful people with wings. But let's have a look at a couple of references where the Bible specifically talks about angels who are God's messengers. And it specifically says that they look like men. So if Liesel can read about Abram and Lot, and then I'm going to ask Weo to read from Judges chapter 13 with Manoah's wife.
Genesis 18 verses 2. He looked up and noticed 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he ran to meet them and welcomed them, bowing low to the ground.
Yeah, so he saw 2 men. It wasn't like, or 3 men. It wasn't this vision of light.
Genesis 19 verses 1 and 5. That evening the 2 angels came to the entrance of the city of Sodom. Lot was sitting there, and when he saw them, he stood up to meet them. Then he welcomed them and bowed with his face to the ground. They shouted to Lot, "Where are the men who came to spend the night with you? Bring them out to us so we can have sex with them."
Yeah, so the men, it's constantly talking about the men. But there must have been something about the men that made them, Lot and Abram realize there was something different about them, that they bowed to the ground, or that they were very respectful towards them. But I definitely do not think it's because they had wings attached to their backs. Then in Judges 13, verse 3, 6, and 21, if you could read that for us, please.
The angel of the Lord appeared to her and said, "You are sterile and childless, but you are going to conceive and have a son." And 6.
Mm-hmm.
Then the woman went to her husband and told him, "A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel of God. Very awesome." And
21.
When the angel of the Lord did not show himself again to Manoah and his wife, Manoah realized that it was the angel of the Lord.
Okay, so there it qualifies. They had not known that it was the angel of the Lord. So if it had been an angel with wings, she could pick up, as we all read, that there was something different about him. She thought it was a man of God with the way he most probably I can just view them as very clean cut, very, don't want to say, I definitely don't believe there was a light shining around them, because otherwise it wouldn't record here that it was only when the angel disappeared and didn't come again that they realized it was an angel of the Lord. So, and then in Hebrews 13 verse 2, it says, be not forgetful to entertain strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unaware. So even if bringing it to our day and age, I know I've often had discussions with my kids. How would we know that a person could maybe be an angel? Would we, what characteristics would that person have? What qualities would they have? I mean, I personally believe they wouldn't be smoking. I don't believe they would be swearing. I would believe that you would feel the presence of God, like just by the enthusiasm or the way they live their lives. I believe is one way one could pick it up, but that's something we could discuss. So there is not a single verse in the Bible that mentions that angels have wings, not one. So where does this idea come from? Well, I think people got mixed up with the cherubim. And this is what a cherubim looks like. It's got 4 wings and it has got 4 faces. But that doesn't look very pretty. I mean, if you look at what the angels look like, it's always this beautiful face and pure face. Now, all of a sudden, I'm saying to you, no, the angel must have the face of a lion, an ox, a man, and an eagle, and he must have 4 wings. And he mustn't have normal feet. He must have feet of oxen. Now, if you can imagine me trying to suggest to Lucas's mom she could put that on her little Christmas tree, I would have been even less popular. But if you want to go and read up about that, that is in Ezekiel chapter 1. Verse 5 to 11, where the cherubim are described. And that's where I think these artists, everything just got blurred, and then angels suddenly became people with wings. So very interesting how pictures, I'm very nervous about pictures. Other pictures that always also you wonder about them. When was Jesus born? Well, we know he was definitely not born in December. So all the Christmas cards which show the snow and they show, we celebrate the birth of Jesus in wintertime. Jesus could not have been born in the wintertime in Israel, because in the winter months of November to March, they're the coldest in Israel and there is even snow. And if you go and read all the articles about, and like say the geography about Israel, the shepherds all say that's the time when you do not go out. You won't find them sitting on the hillsides because it is too cold. So celebrating the birth of Jesus over December is definitely not celebrating Jesus' birth. It's just a convenient date for people to have something exciting. And still talking about when Jesus was born, the wise men came to visit Jesus as well. And how often do we see this picture that's there, where the wise men come and they meet Jesus in the singing in the manger in the cradle. And when I discussed this with someone, they said that if it hadn't happened like this, I mean, they're going to have to rewrite all their plays because it's so, and some songs, because all the songs talk about the wise men coming to Jesus where he was lying in his crib. But if you go and read the scriptures carefully, in Matthew chapter 2, Wheel's there. Matthew chapter 2, verse 11. Wheel, if you could read that for us, please. 11, yeah.
On coming to the house, they saw a child with his mother, Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and of incense and of the myrrh.
Yeah, thank you. So because there's 3 gifts mentioned, people assume there were 3 wise men. But you see the other things that you read. They came to the house and there was a young child, which was definitely not what that picture is. And this picture, I believe, is actually more correct. Mary and Joseph had moved into a house. Jesus was a young child, possibly around about the age of 2 or younger at this stage. And there could have been any number of wise men, whether it was 2, 3, or 4. I'm not going to put my head on a block because the Bible doesn't tell us, but we're just told that there were 3 gifts. So can you see how carefully we've got to read? It's, and again, I mean, I'm not going to bounce up and down, except if someone is wanting me to act out certain things or believe certain things, I will become more outspoken. But it just, to me, it shows how the world is constantly deceiving us. And really, we need to question, especially when pictures are shown, especially this picture. The devil. What does the devil look like? Well, that is a picture of the devil. But if you actually go and read through the scriptures, never, ever is there given a description of a devil that looks like this. You might get the snake or the serpent, but he doesn't look like this. And how often do children see this, whether it's in movies or things as well? And they say, oh, that's the devil. Well, you know what? Something I also ask is, the Bible constantly tells us that the devil is capable of deceiving us. And would you be deceived by that, Will?
No.
No, definitely, I would run a mile if I had to see something like that. So how the devil is the devil going to get a chance to deceive me? And then also the picture of Jesus. I mean, this is what Jesus looks like. If you go and do a search on the internet, those were the first 6 pictures I got. Just typed in, what does Jesus look like? And that's what everyone believes Jesus looks like. A man with a clean-cut face, lovely hair, beard, clean-cut. But if you actually go and do research on Jesus, the area where Jesus was born, the area, what other Galileans looked like, this is what Jesus more likely looked like. Darker skin, more swarthy, heavier features. So there is a picture of an inhabitant of Galilee, where Jesus was from, and you can compare that with the top pictures. I think our Catholics would have a bit of a challenge with what they have, the statues they have up in their churches. So again, it just comes to emotional things and wanting to make religion convenient for you rather than actually learning what the Bible is really sharing with us. So coming to my last point, my little gems. Let's have a look at some gems. Again, undesigned coincidences as well. In Judges, and we're not going to read this, I'll give you a summary, but Judges chapter 8, we read about Gideon fighting the Midianites. And remember, he started off with this massive army, and then it became less because he chose those that leapt or those that were on their knees. He was refining. And eventually, the Bible specifically says there were 300 men in Gideon's army, and the Midianite army was 135,000 people. And if you work the ratio out, that works out there was one Gideonite, or one person in Gideon's army, for 450 people in the Midianite army. That's massive. I mean, that's like the size of a whole grade fighting against you. But why does this Bible specifically mention it? It doesn't have to, but it does. Well, I believe it was for Elijah. That happened some time back. How did Elijah know he would beat the prophets of Baal? In 1 Kings 18, verse 19, it mentions Elijah, one person, and how many prophets of Baal were there? 450. And Elijah would have known his scriptures. So he would have known, hey, Gideon won 1 to 450. I'm 1 to 450. God's going to be on my side. Just one of those like, why did you mention it? Well, there was a reason. Just perfect. Another one, this is now one I was chatting to Lucas about now this week, because if you, we are working through Robert Roberts' reading plan. So we've just finished 1 Samuel. And I'll quickly read this because I want to highlight certain points to you. In 1 Samuel 29, we read about the Philistines wanting to go and fight the Israelites. And it's at this time where David is running away from Saul. And he actually spends a couple of years living with the Philistines. And he becomes a very good friend with the king. Now in 1 Samuel 29, it suddenly says, the Philistines gathered together because they wanted to go and fight the Israelites. And then it mentions in verse 3, the Philistine princes say, why are these Hebrews here? So instead of seeing David and his little army as support to go and fight the Israelites, now the princes are questioning this. Then David says in verse 8, what have I done? Haven't you found me to be a faithful person? So David is now reacting with anger because he feels, gee, this is unfair. I've been with you guys. I've been supporting you, looking after your sheep and everything. And so you can absolutely feel his anger. And then in verse 10, King Achish actually manages to convince David and say to him, you know what, David, let's just keep peace. You know what? Why don't you just go? But go early, because he didn't want war in his own army. And it says at the end of verse 10, they got up early in the morning and they departed to go back to their own hometown. So now you can imagine David and his little army of men who obviously had, I mean, they never turned against the Israelites, but they now angry, they're frustrated, they're feeling cheated on this whole thing. So you can actually imagine this mood of this band of men now having to go back home. In 1 Samuel chapter 30, now they come to their house, of their town Ziklag, and it had been burnt down. So their whole hometown is now burnt down. In verse 2, it says to us that the people had taken the women captive, but they did not kill anyone, whether it was small or great, but just took them all away. But David's army didn't know this. Remember, they weren't there. They didn't see this. But God tells us this. So now we know no one was killed, but David's band of men don't know this. Now imagine, they're already frustrated, they're already angry. They come, now their hometown is burnt down, and their women and their children are all gone. Now they become even more cross, because in verse 6 it says, David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him. Now they're turning against him, an emotional anger. But just look at the way verse 6 ends. So what does he do? He doesn't fight back. It says, David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. So instead of trying to fight the battles back and like take control, he just turned and he said, I'm going to trust God. God must have a reason for this happening. And this is why I found this so beautiful. I thought, this is what's happening in our lives at the moment. There's so many unknowns. There's so many things happening all around us that we actually cannot control. How are we reacting to this? What are we doing? What are we saying? What would our reactions have been in all of this? Further on in 1 Samuel chapter 30, God now says to David, okay, have action, you go. And look how few people there were. He went with 600 people to fight against quite a few thousand again. So again, they didn't look around and say, oh, but we're so few, we can't do anything, we're hungry. And you realize they're very hungry because some 200 men actually fainted. They couldn't carry on. And only 400 now went to go and fight against the enemy. Verse 16, they come and see the enemy. What's the enemy doing? They're eating, they're drinking, they're dancing, they relax. They couldn't care. So God is saying to us, you know what, even if life's becoming tough around you, you stay focused. You keep your eye on your eventual goal. And then they get their women and their children in verse 19 and verse 20. No one's killed, no one hurt, all their sons and daughters are there. They get even more cattle and even more herds. So God, because of their faithfulness, blesses them in abundance. And I mean, that's such a lovely lesson for us. Just stay faithful. Don't look at the immediate things that are happening around you. And then there's a beautiful verse in verse 23 where first David's army didn't want to share the spoil. And then David says, no, my brethren, that which the Lord has given us, who has looked after us and delivered everyone against us, we need to share the blessings. So David didn't keep it all to himself, and those that had actually been actively involved with the war, he just shared it out with everyone. And then also he shares it out with other Israelites who are in a massive time of trouble as well. But why do I say this was an amazing blessing from God's side? That all of this happened to David. That he first gets questioned about his support for King Achish, and then he goes home, and then his hometown is burnt down. Then he thinks his wife and children are killed, and he has to now go and look for them. And God's keeping David busy. Why? Because remember, the Philistines went to fight the Israelites, and it's in that battle that Saul and Jonathan were killed. So if David had been in that battle, he would have been part of an army that killed Saul and Jonathan. So God, with all of this happening, made sure David was away from something he really didn't want to be part of. So in life, to me, this was like a massive lesson. Don't question when things happen that you don't understand, but just step forward in faith, because God is obviously wanting you somewhere else. So he protects you from another situation. Because, I mean, the whole way through Samuel, we just read David never wanted to lift his hand up against Saul. So God makes sure in the final battle, David cannot lift up his hand against Saul. So that was really, you can imagine, I look at some, well, sometimes he just says, can we please get up now? And I say, yeah. Okay, so to close off, also, to me, for us as sisters especially, because I really believe this verse has to do for us as sisters. In Mark 4, verse 38, it says, Jesus was sleeping at the back of the boat with his head on a cushion. Remember, this is where that storm came up and the winds were going everywhere. And the disciples wake him up shouting, teacher, teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown? Now, I mean, first of all, that question to me just boggles my mind, because these guys have been with Jesus, they've seen his miracles, they see what he's capable of doing, and they still question him. But to me, there's two beautiful little verses, two nice things there. It says, Jesus was sleeping in the boat with his head on a cushion. Now, if you just read that verse, you wouldn't think anything about it. But if we go to Matthew chapter 8, verse 20, we read the parallel account. So it's the same story happening, but something else is here. In Matthew chapter 8, verse 20, Jesus says, foxes have dens to live in and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place even to lay his head. And this is where I think there was someone listening to him. And this someone, because if you go from Matthew 8, verse 20, you go to Matthew 8, verse 24, it says the same thing. There was Jesus, but here it just says there was a great tempest going around the ship, but he was asleep. Doesn't say on a cushion or anything. We have to know Mark's reference in 4 verse 38, where it says he was asleep on a cushion. So someone had heard Jesus saying he's got no place to lay his head. So they said, and I believe it was a woman, I'm going to give Jesus a cushion. So when he has got chance to lay down his head, it will be on a cushion. And it'll be nice and soft. And I believe that to me is just so beautiful, to showing the caring aspect. But again, with this parable, similar to the situation we are in, everyone's saying, oh, look at this. We're being surrounded by people dying, COVID, all this protection we've got to take. There's all the restrictions that are being put on us. People are going through emotional strain and mental strain. And Jesus just says to his disciples, why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith? And I believe he's just saying, are you listening? Are we reading the scriptures? Are we aware of how God is going to protect us through this time? And I found a lovely quote, which I think brings us all to a nice close. Sometimes he calms the storm with a whispered, peace be still. Jesus can settle any sea, but it doesn't mean he will. Sometimes he holds us close and lets the wind and waves go wild. Sometimes he calms the storm, and other times he calms his child. And that's the peace I believe we must actually all work towards, getting peace inside our hearts. We can't control our environment, but we can control the way we're reacting to our environment. And thereby ends my potpourri on bouncing throughout the scriptures. I hope you managed to keep track with me. What I'm going to suggest is I've asked Vuyo to close in prayer for us. And the prayer is going to be on the screen as well, because I think it brings everything together, and then we'll open up for everyone to share with us. Is that okay with you? Okay. So Vuyo, will you
pray first?
Yes, well, so we're going to pray now, if that's okay with you.
Yes.
Right, thanks, Vuyo.
Okay, let's bow our head. Dear Lord, teach us to trust in you so that when the unexpected storms of life come, we can expect peace in the midst of those storms, knowing that you are near. Give us the strength to endure this unique situation we are in and to find the blessings and lessons it contains. Please guide our thoughts, words, and actions so that we may forever walk with faith in your path of peace and love. Amen.
Thanks, Vuyo.